Hello, grade 8s. Today we begin our work on functions. This is probably one of the most useful topics in mathematics, and some of you will use functions for the rest of your lives. The rest of us will have mathematical functions being used all around us to assist us in what we do. So that's why I called our very first lesson, Programming Our Life. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to understand and define what a function is and how it works, and you should be able to use function notation to answer questions. So if we think for a second about the word function, you've probably heard it before, particularly in life sciences, when we talk about bodily functions. For example, our heart performs a function. Its function is to do a certain task, and that is to pump blood around our body so that we get oxygen and nutrients that give us energy and basically help us to live. In mathematics, things are also going to be happening. In the previous unit on pattern rules, you discovered that things go in, are transformed by a rule, and other things come out. What I've done below is written the three different types of functions you might look at in grade 8. The first one, a very important one, y equals 3x minus 1, you are going to use this very, very soon to be able to draw a mathematical picture which will create a line. This second function rule that has been written uses function notation, which I will introduce just now. And the third one actually is also a function. It creates a pattern, but it uses different notation with ends and tends. But if you look at it all, it's all the same rule. It just uses different labels or different notation. And it produces a pattern of inputs and outputs. So let's look at function notation. The first thing that we need to look at is at the beginning of our number sentence, where we have f and an x. When we see this notation, we know right away we are looking at a function rule. And we read it in English as f of x. It's just the way that we read this type of notation, and you'll get used to hearing me use this language when describing things. So we'd read this as f of x equals 3x minus 1. And in this rule, we would put numbers in for x, and f of x would come out. So if I use the rule and put numbers in for x, for example, the easiest one that we would see is 1. If I put 1 in for x here, I would get 3 times 1 minus 1, which gives me an output of 2 for f of x. We're working on this in future lessons, but for now, we need to understand and use this table of inputs and outputs. On an assessment, you would see this English. Use the function table to determine. And what that means is, look at this table of values, which is also called a function table, and use the inputs or outputs to determine the final answer. So if we look carefully at the first question, what it's asking us to do is find out what is the output if the input is 2. So it means I need to go over to the table and find where the input value or the x value that was put in was 2. And what it's asking for is what the output was at that particular place. And looking very carefully, it's quickly easy to see that the output is 5. So my answer for the first question then is that the f of 2 is equal to 5, and I would write 5 as my answer. Pause the video now and see if you can answer the next question. It's not the same as the first. We need to find out what the output is when the input was -1. So this type of problem is just a little bit harder than the first one. And we need to go to a different location. So now we're going to go to the outputs column where the output is -1. And if we look carefully at this, when the output is -1, the input value is 0. So focus very carefully on this last step because we're using new notation. We don't write 0 as our answer here. We're going to write it in function notation, and we're going to say the answer is the function of 0, or f of 0, or the place where we put 0 in for x. And we write the answer like that. That's all there is to it. I think you'll find functions are a very easy topic. Go off and practice using those function tables, and we'll meet up next time for working out inputs and outputs using a function rule.